I'm going to start by telling you a little about Power Clean Future Ohio. Then I'll turn it over to our moderator to dive into a discussion with a great panel, as you can see on the slide that's up, that we have. So let's go ahead and get to it. So Power Clean Future Ohio launched earlier this year to work with local government leaders across the state to transition communities to clean energy and collectively reduce our carbon emissions. This campaign is powered by an expansive, diverse coalition of organizations that come at this issue from a variety of angles. As you can see from the extensive list on our website, which I believe our host will drop into the chat here in a moment, our partners include environmental organizations, renewable energy groups, chambers of commerce, small and large businesses, advocacy and grassroots organizations, and EV and solar companies. They are all supporting this effort because we share a vision of an Ohio that is powered by renewable energy, that owns the booming electric vehicle market, that is the most efficient state in this country, and that creates jobs and financial opportunity that previous generations did not enjoy or have access to. We want to see a state where everyone has access to clean water, and our communities have clean air to breathe. We aren't there yet, but we want to help our local leaders make that vision a reality by providing them the tools and resources to get there. Cities account for 70% of global CO2 emissions, 70%. And urban areas consume 75% of the global energy supply, a number that is expected to only increase. So here's how I see the road ahead, and I expect many of our panelists would agree. If we can solve it locally, we can solve it globally. It's an all hands on deck approach to the biggest challenge we've ever faced. And that's where we come in. Power Clean Future Ohio is here to help local leaders identify the right local solutions. So, if your city wanted to reduce emissions, how would you start? We know not every city has the staff capacity or the resources. So if your city or your county joins us and becomes a PCFO community, you get access to the deep technical expertise in our coalition. Grant writing assistance, policy resources, fully funded consulting services for things like fleet inventories that would typically require upfront costs to even take that first step. All of this is free. However, it will require some staff time to collaborate directly with our team. We think of the path to a clean energy future in 4 key policy buckets: renewable energy, energy efficiency, transportation electrification, and land use. We have a number of recommendations within each of these buckets that your community can implement. These policy actions fall into 2 categories: city-controlled and city-influenced. Changing government operations is really important, but it also only goes so far. Cities are excellent conveners and trusted communicators to residents. There are a number of ways municipal governments can influence local residents and businesses to encourage economic activities and community solutions that will reduce emissions and potentially grow clean energy jobs. One of the resources I mentioned is launching publicly today. Power Clean Future Ohio is proud to release the Ohio Clean Energy and Sustainable Communities Toolkit, a comprehensive resource providing clean energy solutions and recommendations to Ohio's municipalities. You all should see a link in the toolkit in the chat here in a moment. I encourage everyone to dive in and review the information. Let us know what you think or what you want to see happen in your community. We have 2 additional exciting Power Clean Future Ohio announcements for you this evening at the end of our event, so please stay tuned. I'd now like to turn it over to our moderator for this evening, Carla Walker, the climate advisor for the city of Cincinnati. We are so fortunate to have Carla moderating our conversation tonight. She brings deep expertise and experience with local government, sustainability, and clean energy issues. Welcome, Carla, and take it away.
Thanks, Joe, and congratulations on the toolkit. Tonight, we will discuss the economic development opportunities associated with growing Ohio's clean and renewable energy sector, and hear about real success stories from our panelists. We will also discuss resident and business engagement opportunities in this work. And finally, we will discuss how environmental justice and equity can and should be a key focus on this work as we reduce emissions, create healthier environments for all Ohio residents, and boost our local economies. So we encourage you to ask questions throughout the session utilizing the chat or the Q&A feature below. And while we may not be able to answer those questions live, we will follow up with you following the event. So please join me in welcoming our panelists, Mayor John Cranley of Cincinnati, Ohio, Mayor Jim Brainerd of Carmel, Indiana.
Hello.
Mayor Megan George of Lakewood, Ohio.
Good evening.
And Mr. Alex Fisher of the Columbus Partnership.
Great to be here with everybody.
Fantastic. So let's dive into this conversation. We have a lot to cover here and not an awful lot of time. So it's recommended that you try to keep your answers to about 2 to 3 minutes. And we'll start off, this is a question for everyone. And it's a general basic question to get us started. What is the one accomplishment in your city that you are most proud of when it comes to clean air, clean energy, and climate? So we'll begin with Mayor George.
Thank you. You know, we've been doing a lot in the city of Lakewood in terms of clean energy. I'm a new mayor. I was elected January 1st of this year, and quite the year to be a mayor. But even in the midst of this pandemic we're in, Lakewood has really, I feel, been a leader in clean energy. We probably the proudest accomplishment, and something I worked on when I was on city council, is getting solar panels on our municipal facilities. We're in the process of wrapping up this project that began at the end of last year, and we've established solar panels on 4 of our municipal facilities. Excited about that and looking for other opportunities to add some panels to additional buildings throughout the community.
Fantastic. You said solar, so I'm going to ask Mayor Cranley if he can answer that question as well. What's the one accomplishment in Cincinnati that you're most proud of when it comes to the climate and clean energy work?
Thank you, and it's great to be with this awesome group, and it's also exciting that it's moderated by a wonderful Cincinnatian by the name of Carla Walker, my wonderful and longtime friend. We have signed a contract and will break ground this year on the largest city-led solar project in the country, over 100 megawatts of energy, which doesn't mean a lot to the average person. That no one knows what a megawatt is, but just to give you some sense of scale, this is more energy than it takes to pump water to 2 million residents and commercial customers in Ohio and Kentucky. We supply water to northern Kentucky, the city of Cincinnati. So all of our water customers, 2 million in total. You know, when you turn on the faucet at home, it takes energy to get the water there. Similarly, we treat sewage for 800,000 people in Hamilton County. We don't do northern Kentucky on the sewage front. And 100 megawatts of energy annually is more energy that it takes to do all of that. There are a lot of great initiatives in California. My good friend Eric Garcetti is the mayor of LA, and they have their own utility. And they're doing, I think, a 40 megawatt solar investment. So this is gigantic. It's in Highland County, it's in Ohio. And we are going to supply enough energy for all of our work. And because of economies of scale, we're bringing down the price that we are competitive. I think later in this panel, I'll get more into the details of the pricing and how we did an audit to figure this out. And I'm happy to get into those details. But for an opening statement, I think this is by far our proudest accomplishment, and we hope that others can either add on to our program or do their own.
Well, congratulations to both of you. Mayor Brainerd, I'm curious if you could also respond there in terms of Carmel, Indiana. And you've been a mayor for several terms, so I know you probably have a number of accomplishments to choose from. What's the one accomplishment you would say you're most proud of when it comes to the clean energy work and climate change work you're doing? You're on mute, Mayor. I'm sorry. If you can unmute yourself. Again.
It's great to be with everyone. I had the good fortune to do some graduate work in Ohio. It's an 8. I see Dave Berger from Lima's on the line. So hello, David. But the one thing that we've done in Carmel, we were a car suburb. You had to drive to go anywhere. Couldn't walk to the neighborhood store. You couldn't walk really anywhere you needed to go besides to go out for a walk. And we made the jump through a series of public-private partnerships, having a downtown area where one can work and live, go to shows, go to restaurants, coffee shops, without getting in your car. I think it's important to recognize that the average American adult spends roughly 2 hours a day in their car. We designed cities for people for thousands of years, for several millennia, and then the car comes along. We get over 25% car ownership at the end of World War II, right after the war ended in late 40s, early 50s. And we spent about 70 some years designing our cities, not for people, but for cars. The sprawl is terribly expensive, so that takes money away from the safety net, social safety net that we need to help people with. Takes money away from so many other important things. So what we've done that has helped us more than anything and allowed us to do a lot of other things with those savings is to design this denser. We don't go over 5 stories. We built it like Western Europe was built for centuries, but walkable, kind of a car-free zone. We don't really need a car if you don't want to drive one. So that's the one thing that I think we've done that many suburban cities, we're in the Indianapolis metro area, the largest edge city. Many suburban cities haven't been able to do that yet, and that's probably the thing that I'm most pleased about.
Great, thank you. Alex, I'm going to turn this question to you as well. From your perch at the Columbus Partnership, what's the one accomplishment in Columbus that you would say you're most proud of for the city with respect to the work that's been done, the incredible amount of work that's been done in Columbus on sustainability, climate change, and clean energy?
Yeah, thank you, Carla, and I appreciate your leadership. And it's great to be with the mayors today. We're a CEO group and a partner in our city with our mayor in everything that we do in public-private partnership. You know, we fundamentally believe that the power is in cities. You know, the future and the solutions to our country's problems rest with our mayors and local governments and these partnerships that we develop with each other. We're on a scale where we can get things done and solve problems. So one of the things we've done, we were the winner of the U.S. Smart Cities program. We lead the Midwest and non-ZEV states in EV adoption. Fundamentally, we just know and believe that the combustion engine is going to be a relic, that autonomy is changing how we think about transportation. You know, it's not hard to believe that a kid born today won't need a driver's license in their lifetime. They certainly won't know what a gas tank is. And if we think about what Mayor Brainerd was talking about and how that shapes and changes how our cities are going to develop, how that shapes, you know, the future state of the kinds of cities that we're going to be able to live in. And a little later, we'll talk more about what we're also doing, very similar to Cincinnati. We're not quite as advanced as they are, but we're pursuing some equally aggressive ideas and programs around clean energy. And if you think about what Ohio's mayors are doing across clean energy, you know, it's really going to be the driver, I believe, in the energy footprint of the state.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll stick with you, Alex. I'm familiar a little bit with the choice aggregation in Columbus. And so I'm wondering if you could give us a little bit of background on how community choice aggregation in Columbus is going to benefit residents and local businesses.
You know, yeah. So as a part of our Smart Cities Challenge, you know, we were a business community and a mayor who aren't afraid to say in partnership that climate change is real, that we've got to do something about it. We have a fundamental belief that we can be a carbon neutral community, but that we've got to be aggressive about doing that. And so, similar to a program that Mayor Cranley can talk about that they're doing in Cincinnati, we have a ballot initiative that's coming up that if it passes this fall, which we believe that it will be the pathway to 700 megawatts of new renewable energy power in our city, fueling hundreds of thousands of households. Over $1 billion will result in energy investment if that ballot initiative, replaces. And so, if you think about what we're doing, what Cincinnati's doing, Cleveland has a program as well. It's the cities of Ohio that are moving forward in this clean environment and clean energy economy that we're committed to.
Thank you for that. I really like how you said earlier that you all fundamentally believe that the power is in cities. And so I'm going to pose this next question for the mayors. I've worked with several mayors in Cincinnati and mayors across the country, and a couple of mayors in a couple of other different countries. And I believe that wholeheartedly as well, that kind of really making that difference globally rests with what happens at the local level. So we're going to start with Mayor Brainerd with this question, and then I'll ask Mayor Cranley and Mayor George to respond as well. How can cities approach clean energy as a community, right? Ensuring that all communities have a voice. And I'd love to know if you can speak also with giving an example of how you may have done this in your city. Mayor Brainerd? I think you're also on mute again, Mayor Brainerd.
I'm sorry about that. I wanted to make sure there wasn't any feedback. I'm a Republican, and I often get asked as a Republican, why are you trying to lead on the environment? The rest of the Republican Party isn't there. As we talk about different communities trying to bring them together, I think this is important. So I usually first point out to the person asking that question, or I say, I haven't met a Republican or a Democrat that wants their family to drink dirty water or breathe dirty air. And then I point out that these used to be nonpartisan issues. Back in, might argue, Republican issues. It was Teddy Roosevelt, a Republican, who set aside our national parks. It was Ike Eisenhower, a Republican, who set aside the Arctic Reserve. It was President Nixon, then President Ford, after he resigned, that signed the Environmental Protection Agency, the first time we had a federal Environmental Protection Agency. Well, it's legislation such as the Migratory Bird Act, the Endangered Species Act, the amendments to the Clean Water Drinking Act that gave it some teeth. It was Reagan under Margaret Thatcher's tutelage as a chemist, I think, that went and helped get the Montreal protocols done to avoid an ozone hole in the northern hemisphere, as we had in the southern hemisphere, which much to save millions of lives from cancer that we would have had that not been done. So we have this tradition in the Republican Party, and so I'm talking to Carmel, 65-70% traditionally at least Republican, and so I'm talking to people many times that don't think they're supposed to be interested in the environment, and so I try to bring them into the discussion. We try to listen to our community. We get ideas from all different sorts of groups in the community about what we should be doing. And we try to take the best ideas and implement those.
Great. Mayor Cranley.
Well, first, let me say how refreshing it is to hear Mayor Brainerd talk about that wonderful bipartisan history. And I think we should all embrace that. And very, very, very well said. Look, I think, a couple things. One, with the solar project that I discussed, we have an African-American owned business that is the lead contractor on the project. And we have a project labor agreement with the IBEW union to ensure fair wages and good pension contribution on the project. In addition, in terms of getting the community involved, we took advantage of our aggregation powers that we did pass by a vote of the people, a while ago, in order to get the buying power needed to get a project of that size. And having an inclusive approach from the beginning was essential.
Thank you for that. Mayor George, how would you say a city can approach clean energy and a clean energy strategy as a community? And if you have any examples to share.
So Lakewood, which is an inner ring suburb of Cleveland, we're a very progressive community, and we have a lot of homegrown talent in this area. So in fact, 2 of our 7 council members, council is a part-time job here in Lakewood, but as their full-time job, they work in the clean energy sector. So we're able to tap into their resources quite often, but also have community meetings and hear what, again, our homegrown talent has to say about clean energy and what we can do as a city to reduce our carbon footprint. Another important issue for Lakewood too is erosion along our lakeshore. So we've begun to have some community meetings to discuss how do we address that, which is absolutely due to climate change and rising levels of Lake Erie. So again, it's tapping into our homegrown talent, tapping into our council members, and really listening to our community of how we can push the agenda forward.
Thank you for that. One of the other community members is the business and corporate sector. So Alex, I'm curious if you can give us a sense of how local governments and their local business partners can work together in reducing emissions and growing the local clean energy economy.
Yeah, the motivation for business is just that. It's smart business. Every day we work with economic development clients that are interested in expanding in Central Ohio, moving to the state of Ohio. And I've never once had one of them ask me, tell me about your coal plant. Every one of them in this modern economy ask us about renewable energy. For all of our cities, this is about basic competitiveness. It's about basic infrastructure. It's sort of like the cities who aren't moving in this direction, you're going to miss the interstate interchange of the future. And so as a business organization with 75 of the top leading companies in Central Ohio, we view it as an economic necessity that we aggressively move in this direction because it's what we want for our own businesses, but it's also what our counterparts who were constantly recruiting to this great state want for theirs as well. So it's an economic imperative.
Good. Mayor George, in a recent article, which was actually highlighting Lakewood's newest EV charger station, congratulations, by the way, you were quoted as saying, "We're pursuing projects which are also good for Lakewood's taxpayers with return on investment and alignment with city standards and priorities being key components in our decision making," which I absolutely love that whole quote. Given the current economic crisis and tight budgets that cities are seeing, what are ways in which cities with limited room in their budgets can continue to do this work and balance those priorities and interests?
Sure, I think this is a challenge all of us as municipal leaders face is how do we implement some of these very important initiatives to reduce our carbon footprint, but also work them into a defined budget. And that's even more important right now with the impact that COVID-19 has had on all of our municipal budgets. So we've, as I mentioned at the beginning, solar is certainly a way to help in that area. We're also replacing our old mercury light bulbs with LED, so we reduce our energy usage. We are looking to add hybrid vehicles to our fleet whenever possible. So those are some of the things that we are doing to, again, reduce the carbon footprint, but also be mindful of the budget as well.
Thank you. Mayor Cranley, this might be an opportunity here to talk a little bit more about how, if at all, COVID-19 has impacted some of the clean energy work that we've been doing here in Cincinnati. Can you speak to that?
Sure. One of the other initiatives that we have aggressively pursued is a 2030 district where we've recruited, I think, over 10 million square feet of office space in downtown, private sector landlords to work together to reduce our carbon footprint by 50% collectively by 2030. It's gotten off to a great start. There's a lot of collaborative work that can be done at the local level just by the moral suasion of the issue. People want to be involved. It's not a mandate. It's volunteer efforts. And frankly, the COVID crises, the four crises of the pandemic, the recession, racial injustice issues, and gun violence have been a huge distraction. And so I think it has slowed down just because, I've never been busier in my professional life dealing with multiple crises at the same time. And so I'll admit that we've made huge progress. I think we're one of the top 10 most square foot in the country on the 2030 district. But I think we wanted to be further along than we are now. And I think COVID just slowed us down.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mayor, thank you for that. Mayor Brainerd, are you seeing some of the similar sorts of impacts from COVID-19 and the pandemic on what you all are doing there in Carmel?
Well, I think it's important to recognize that COVID-19 is a respiratory disease, and clean air is more important than ever as we're dealing with people that struggle from COPD and asthma and then may end up with COVID-19. As we try to finance environmental improvements, I think the first place to start, whether it's pandemic budgets or regular budgets, look at everything we're already doing as municipalities. You own the sewer company. Is there a way to do household hazardous waste sites and pickups? If you're buying fleets for your police department or fire departments, is there a way to get hybrids? Or we're actually using some hydrogen snowplows in Carmel. You already have budget lines to do those things. So the first place to start, before you start doing all the fancy, expensive things that require capital investment, there's some ways to do that too. I think it's important to look at your existing budget lines. Okay, how do we work in every department of the city to make it our own operations cleaner and set an example then for the private sector companies and others in the community. And I think you do that whether it's pandemic budgets or regular budgets. But I think because of the pandemic, it's a respiratory disease, that we ought to have even more discussion, particularly about clean air.
Your comments make me think about the question in terms of equity and inclusion around these matters, and how we actually do that. There is this multiple crisis that cities are dealing with. And so I'm curious and this would be for all of the panelists, if you could talk a little bit about how governments and businesses can work together to prioritize these economic opportunities and with a lens towards equity and justice for all. Alex, we'll go with you first, and then we'll go through the round of mayors.
Yeah, look, the first thing we've got to do at every opportunity is to just simply keep reinforcing the fact that systemic racism is real, it's persistent, it's a problem that's got to be solved. And, at least 4 of the 5 of us on this panel are all white privileged. And we need to accept the equity challenges that have come with it. And as the mayor was pointing out, this COVID pandemic isn't treating everybody equally. It is disproportionately impacting lower income and minority populations in our communities. And then therefore we have to keep thinking about how we design solutions. And so as we think about these initiatives, one of the core things we're thinking about in Columbus is not simply how to take these technologies and advancements to the suburbs, how to make sure that they're reaching our inner city residents, those who have been disproportionately impacted, may not have the same economic means, and how we use technology advancements to break down the barriers of equity. We don't have the solutions, but we better be talking about them very bluntly, very candidly, in search of those solutions. I'm confident that, again, the power of cities and the innovation from mayors, can innovate, but only if we're talking openly and directly about it, and not sticking our head in the sand on these most important issues.
I wholeheartedly agree. I'm going to jump to you, Mayor George, and I wonder if you can provide some perspective in terms of what Lakewood might be doing to ensure that there is that inclusion as you all work together on terms of prioritizing economic opportunity, equity, and justice in this work.
Yeah, so, as was mentioned before, systemic racism, it's a problem and it's real, and we as leaders need to address this issue within our society. And, us as leaders and as mayors need to come and figure out solutions that are going to reach our entire communities, not just for the few. So we need to work to break down those barriers. I know myself, I've established an anti-racism task force here in Lakewood. We are working on putting the final touches on nominating residents within our community to be on that task force, to really look and dive into our community and find ways that we can, try to solve this problem that's in our society. So that's something I'm very proud of, and I'm looking forward to the work that comes out of that task force.
That's great. That's very impressive. Mayor Cranley, you spoke a little bit when we were talking about the solar project here in Cincinnati and the work you have done with the individual who's the business owner, and that business owner being an African-American business owner. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about the work that you're leading on in Cincinnati to ensure that we have that partnership with African-American or minority business leaders to be a part of this clean energy transformation that we're making here in Cincinnati.
Absolutely. A couple things. First, as you know, Carla, when I was elected, the city had procurement with outside contracts of African-American businesses of just 2%. In a city that's about 45% African-American. And we've moved it up fivefold, still not as high as we want it to be, but over 11% annually, consistently. And we're very proud of that, although we want to do more. And as I mentioned, our solar partner is an African-American owned business. We've also not just worked with businesses, but also work on environmental justice issues. Just today, we received a $3.5 million check from HUD to work on lead abatement, which is a major issue that affects low-income communities. Later this week, we'll be announcing an economic hardship relief from utility bills because of COVID, which will also disproportionately impact low-income neighborhoods. And so we're trying to take a comprehensive approach on this. And as you know, Carla, we're unique in having a public health department that operates its own literal healthcare services. We have 6 FQHCs that we operate. So we have city employees who are nurses and doctors, provide primary care. So all of these things are part of a comprehensive approach to environmental justice and touch on so many different things we're dealing with. And as Mayor Brainerd says, with COVID being a respiratory disease, clean air is, one of many things that we've got to take a closer look at.
Well said, well said. Mayor Brainerd, how do we ensure that the clean energy transition not only protects the most vulnerable, but also provides new opportunities for those marginalized communities? Are there ways in which we can think about investment going into these communities also? And if so, what would that look like?
Yeah. I think Mayor Cranley is absolutely on point when he talks about tracking investment with minority businesses. That's part of it, but it's also important to track the capital investment that the city makes in environmental improvements by neighborhood to make certain that inadvertently the poorer neighborhoods are getting the investment they need so that everyone can thrive and prosper and have an equal shot at what we all grew up hearing about, the American dream. We need to make certain, particularly in our poorer neighborhoods, that the investment in parks, in infrastructure, of course, particularly in clean air, walkability, are as available in those neighborhoods as they are in our wealthier neighborhoods. And I think many times cities don't pay enough attention to how much the city as a whole is investing in the neighborhoods that need it the most.
Great. Mayor George, I'm wondering if you could offer some perspective on that as well. How do we make sure that the most vulnerable are protected, but we also begin to invest in those communities so that they are truly a part, integrated into the development of that clean energy transformation we're making?
Yeah, I mean, I think Mayor Brainerd summed it up pretty well. And, you know, the idea of tracking investments by neighborhood to make sure that we are, you know, spreading our city resources equally across every neighborhood. Like you mentioned, continue to invest in our parks, to invest in our walkability, for us to invest in our shoreline along Lake Erie, make sure that our investments are equal across the board.
Great. Alex, I'm going to start with you on this one, and I'd love to hear your perspective as a CEO membership focused group. How does investing in clean energy, renewables, EVs, which is one of my favorite topics, energy efficiency, benefit a community's economic growth potential? And how have you seen that take root in Columbus?
You know, look, I think all of our businesses, you know, ultimately are dependent on having a vibrant workforce. Workforces are dependent on vibrant cities that people want to live in. Where do people want to live, work, play, pray? That means we have to have modern, contemporary cities and infrastructure that goes with it to make sure that we're attracting the workforce of the future, that make sure that we provide the foundation for continuing to grow and operate our business. You know, so again, on one hand, you know, this is absolutely critical for the economy. On the other hand, it's critical for the future of the planet. And the two aren't mutually exclusive. They work together with one another. And so whether it's you know, adopting and driving the change to electric vehicles or renewable energy technologies or energy efficiency programs, they all work together to make our environment better, that make our cities healthier, that create the contemporary new cities that people want to live in. And so I believe placemaking into the future is going to matter more than ever. But it's good placemaking, and it's going to be really important that urban planners and mayors, you know, are at the forefront of innovation in making their cities the most livable possible places as the core attribute to growing their economies.
And a follow-up to that, since you mentioned innovation, I'm curious if there are certain innovations we should be looking at in terms of investing, kind of moving things forward for the cities that are on the panel. We'll start with you, Alex, if you have some suggestions, but then I'd love to also hear from the mayors in terms of innovations they would really be looking at investing in.
You know, I would, you know, one of the things that we're looking hard at is, you know, accessibility to the electronic infrastructure. You know, what's it going to be to mean 5G? Who will be the first city to go to 6G? Who makes that accessible to everybody? How do we make sure that there's not an electronic digital divide that is furthering the equity problems, but rather bridging those gaps? So fundamental infrastructure choices, you know, are going to be, you know, absolutely critical. Again, the infrastructure of broadband is going to be as important as the infrastructure in Roman cities of sewers were 2,000 years ago.
Great. Mayors Brainerd, Cranley, or George, do you have a response in terms of innovations you would like to see cities beginning to explore with respect to the clean energy conversation?
I think there's several things cities can do in the Midwest. First of all, the solar panels make sense. We can do those in our sewer and water facilities. We're in the process of doing that with a minority firm right now. But we can also look at something that hasn't been done a lot in our part of the Midwest, a little bit in Minnesota, and a lot on the East Coast, but energy centers, where we run many buildings off one energy center. So you avoid the waste and inefficiency of having to heat up a HVAC system for a building and then having it cool off and having it heat up. I'm told you can save up almost 50% of the energy costs, and of course 50% of the carbon emissions, by just having it serve several buildings and then rotating it between buildings or having it cycle so it never really turns off. It's a much more efficient way of doing it. I think we need to be looking at hydrogen and other innovation for our city fleets. And of course, paying attention back to Joe Flaherty's 4 buckets. That fourth one, city design, is tremendously important as we continue to rebuild and redesign and restructure our cities.
Great. I don't know if Mayor Cranley or Mayor George, if you want to get in on that question before we move on.
Well, as you know, we just passed our first ever massive public transit levy, voter approved sales tax countywide to dramatically expand public transit. We've also made major investments in converting rail lines into hike and bike trails. And we have moved extremely quickly to do outdoor dining facilities and to reduce the size of roads that slows down traffic and makes neighborhoods in downtown over the Rhine more pedestrian friendly in general. And so all of those things are innovations that are helping to recapture public space for walking and different modes of travel.
And congratulations on all of that, especially under a pandemic. Mayor George, anything you'd like to add on that, on the innovation question?
Yes, so Lakewood is the densest city in the state of Ohio. So we were designed at the turn of the last century. So we have, we're a very walkable community. You know, I grew up here. I walked to and from school. We still have kids that walk to and from school. And quite frankly, if you don't, some families don't have a car because you can walk to school, you can walk to the grocery store, you can walk to the dry cleaner. So we're continuing to invest in our sidewalks, making sure they're ADA accessible, but we're also investing in bike infrastructure. We've added a lot of that, and you know, investing in solar and hybrids, and continue to invest in more EV charging stations as well.
I want to jump in because Megan touched on an excellent point there a minute ago, and that is designing a city where people don't have to have a car or multiple cars, especially for poor families. We talk about equity. the ability to raise the status of one's family, generation to generation. But those cars are expensive. The insurance is expensive. The licensing is expensive. The gasoline is expensive. If we design cities so that people can not need a car or not need 2 or 3 cars in some cases, we've done a tremendous thing for the people that need that extra money the most. And Mayor George is exactly right. That is so important. And we used to know, you made the point, your city was designed 100 years ago. We designed our cities much better. We need to look back at how we did it historically. There's so much money to be saved by not having sprawl, and it is so much better for our residents, particularly low-income residents.
That's fantastic that you were saying this about city design. We are fortunate to have a diverse set of city representatives on the panel, large, small cities, liberal, conservative cities. But I'd love to hear from the mayors. Now that we have heard a lot about the successes and the examples that you all have set, I'm curious if you could share with us some of the challenges of doing this work that you have overcome and how you've overcome those challenges. I think that would be helpful for folks to hear and learn about. We'll first start with Mayor George, if you could share what are some of the challenges you've experienced in the short time that you've been mayor, but I know you've been an elected official and you've been involved in these issues. If you could share some issue around what has been kind of a sticky point, but that you've been able to overcome it as mayor.
Yeah, I'll say as a newly elected mayor, although I'm now 10 months in, the vast majority of my tenure has been around COVID-19 and pandemic response. So we're just now getting into looking at some of the vision I had laid out when I was running for mayor last year and implementing that. So certainly the pandemic has, as some of the other mayors alluded to, had slowed things down a bit. But we're still getting things done, and that's what's important. Although the timing of our solar panels, we'd like to have those up 4 months ago, we're still getting those up and we're still moving forward. The EV charging station, the third one should have been active in the summer, but due to pandemic and changing shifts with our public works department, it just got up and running here that last week. But the important thing is when you're faced with a challenge like that, you have to still move forward and implement the important components to dealing with climate change.
Mayor Cranley, challenges that you've overcome in the clean energy agenda you've been able to move forward?
Well, I think when we embraced sourcing renewable energy, it took a long time to do an audit and really figure out how we could do it without having to pay up taxpayer money for it. And we were able to essentially convert 30% of our own use to renewable energy at the same cost as fossil fuel energy. And that'll get better over time because the pricing of solar continues to go down. We were able to get to 100 megawatts because we added in less than 10% of our aggregation customers, and also did that without increasing the price to our aggregation customers. We are doing some rooftop solars, and some of those make sense economically when you can get behind the so-called grid, but they're a lot harder to justify economically. But we are probably doing about 3 or 4 megawatts by rooftops as well. So I think it's really important to maintain credibility and taxpayer trust to really dive in on the pricing and make sure that that you're at least converting all energy that is in fact cheaper or the same price of fossil fuel to renewable sources. And for us, that was about 30% of our total consumption, and it'll get better over time.
We have time for about one more question. I'm going to pose it to all of you, but I'll start with Mayor Brainerd. And you've been interjecting this topic into the conversation, and I'm so thankful you have been. I read recently that the secret to your climate work is in city design, which you've spoken about today, and the incredible work you've done with roundabouts. But mayors are just beginning to speak more about city design as it relates to climate change and kind of really weaving those two things together. So I'm curious if you could offer what you think are some potential knowledge gaps that need to be addressed, not just for city electeds, but for city staff and even the public to further implement or accelerate some of the clean energy plans or initiatives.
Well, one of the things that we haven't done very well collectively in the United States since the invention of the car is to fiscally analyze our zoning decisions. Do we take into account, if a fire station costs $5 million a year to staff, are we going to design the city so we need 10 stations, or we only need 5 because we're denser, like the town that Mayor George is from? What the cost of extending services, policing, fire, water, sewer, maintenance of streets, farther and farther out. A street in the Midwest, a nice street with a bike path and curbs and storm sewers, still $10 to $12 million a mile from scratch. And so are we going to have 500 miles of those streets to serve 100,000 people? Or are we going to have 250 miles of those streets to serve 10,000 people? We use our roundabouts. We move 50% more cars per hour, so we don't have to widen the streets as much. So many times, the civil engineer, the city engineer gets a call, congestion problem from a council member or the mayor. Oh, the solution is to widen the street, and all they're really doing is creating a bigger parking lot to get more cars through the green cycle. Let's be more thoughtful about how we design our cities. And I didn't comment on the last question, which was about our challenges, but these two really fit together. Here I am in a 60-70% Republican city. We'll see what it is this time. 60 to 70% Republican city, but I get some fiscal conservatives say, "Why are you spending money?" Remember, we got close to $1 million in the stimulus in the last recession back in 2012 or so, 11, and I used that money to the energy and environmental block grants were funded for the first time. So I used that money to switch out most of our streetlights to LEDs. I remember one very conservative gentleman coming up to me and saying, "Why'd you spend all that money?" And I thought, there's different ways to get to the same place here. So I didn't talk about the environment. I didn't talk about global warming. I talked about the 22% return on investment we're going to get through lower electric bills. And he went away happy. So
speaking to him where he is, right? So you have to get exactly.
So that's a long-winded answer to the question, but I think you come at it from different directions. Many ways to get there.
We're gonna wrap up real quick. We've got about a minute, actually. Alex or Mayor George or Mayor Cranley, are there knowledge gaps that you would like to see get addressed as cities move forward?
Look, I think we've got to build cities that are entrepreneurial hotbeds. Innovation comes when people are willing to risk money. We need more venture capital. We sit here right in the center of the U.S., from Carmel, Indiana to Columbus, from Purdue and the University of Cincinnati and University of Michigan and Case Western and Carnegie Mellon and the Ohio State University. We are a talent pool. We know entrepreneurialism happens when kids are coming out of school. The average age of the entrepreneur in the Fortune 1000 company CEOs when they founded the company is 25. But we've got to invest in entrepreneurialism so that we're investing in the innovations and the investment in those innovations that are going to drive our cities forward.
Good point. Mayor George, Mayor Cranley, just to wrap things up.
I agree with what Alex said in terms of entrepreneurial ecosystem, and we're doing all that. I think specifically for environmental opportunities for local government is to do some form of an energy audit to figure out what are you paying per kilowatt at what time of the day, and that will give you options to approach renewable energy purchasing.
Fantastic. Mayor George, we'll end with you.
Yep, thank you. I know we don't have a lot of time, so I'll keep it brief. I agree with, what the mayors and the panelists said about, entrepreneurship and energy audits. And, at the end of the day, cities can lead the charge here making for a better future and and reduce our carbon footprint. So we'll keep doing that.
Well, thank you all so much, Mayor John Cranley, Mayor Jim Brainerd, Mayor Megan George, and Mr. Alex Fisher for joining us this evening. I love talking with you guys. This was really a pleasure and such an honor. Joe, I'm going to turn it back over to you. I hear you have some exciting announcements for us.
Yes, thank you, Carla. But first, thank you to you for hosting such a great discussion. Moderating was a really, really interesting conversation tonight. I think we heard a variety of different ways that local communities can join in this clean energy transition. We know it's happening, and I hope all of the city leaders that were able to join tonight want to also engage in this conversation and work with us to pursue some of the interesting policy opportunities that we heard tonight. So before we wrap up, I want to alert you to two additional resources. We mentioned at the beginning the launch of the Ohio Clean Energy and Sustainable Communities Toolkit. We are also launching our statewide peer-to-peer network for local elected leaders and staff to connect on clean energy issues in Ohio. These PCFO peer connection conversations will be bi-monthly deep dives and discussions into how you can approach a clean energy policy opportunity in your community. We are planning to discuss how communities can transition to 100% clean energy and commit to carbon reduction goals during the first meeting we'll have in November. I know that Mayor Cranley and Mayor George in particular here in Ohio have committed to doing that work, and I'm sure some of their folks would have great insight into that conversation. So these dialogues that we'll be having give you an opportunity to connect with peers across the state, so fellow mayors, fellow city council members, city managers, who are all passionate about these issues and are looking for pathways forward. The second opportunity I want to bring your attention to will also launch later this year. It's a first of its kind pilot program that provides technical resources to measure your community's greenhouse gas emissions alongside catered equity coaching for local government officials. This pilot program for 10 cities in collaboration with the Ohio Environmental Council and the Ohio Mayors Alliance will provide local leaders the opportunity to set realistic and measurable carbon reduction goals with a focus on equity and justice and how they consider, set, and achieve those goals. If your city is interested in this program, please reach out to me. My email address is joe@poweracleanfuture.org. I'll be sure to provide you with the interest form to get your community considered. And of course, if you would like your community to join Power Clean Future Ohio, please contact me after the event and we'll set up a meeting to talk further. Joining PCFO is free and provides you with a number of excellent resources that we discussed tonight to build a cleaner, more sustainable local economy and environment. So with that, I want to thank our excellent panel tonight for the great discussion. Thanks all of you for attending, and thank you, Carla, for moderating the event. We'll be sure to follow up with attendees after the event with more information and, of course, an event summary as well that you can share out. So in the meantime, feel free to visit powercleanfuture.org to view our toolkit and check out other resources. So thanks again to all the panelists, and I hope you all have a great evening.
Thanks, Joe. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Congratulations. Thanks, mayors and Alex. Appreciate it.